And or other, the conversation turned to what is your favorite holiday? So we got the Halloween, the Christmas, the Easter, different holidays. And it got to be my turn, and my daughter said, no, I know what it is. It's Research Day. So my loving family has heard much about you, even though you may not have met them, because we care so much about this event. Really excited to welcome everyone here from our Department of Psychiatry family. So our faculty, trainees, and staff, our wonderful colleagues and leaders in the School of Medicine, as well as some special guests that we'll be introducing throughout the program. So I'd like to start out just with a few comments, and then we'll let you know kind of the plan for this time we have. So first is Jill Rockweisel, our wonderful chair, is out after a brief medical procedure, and she tried 3 times to come today, and I think her husband, the first gentleman of the department, finally put the kibosh on that. So she sent a text, so I'll read it. Welcome to our annual Research Day as we share our successes of both our faculty and trainees as well as our essential staff. I want to apologize for my absence and want to let you know how disappointed, there's a lot of emojis, I am to not be with you, sharing the excitement of our teams and the thrill for our winners and awards. And I will say, Jill spent a lot of time thinking about the research awards and recognition, so we're doing a little bit different things this year. I encourage everyone to take a few minutes after the formal program to reach out and introduce yourself to our winners. They have worked very hard and we are very proud of them. So let's make them feel like celebrities. So that's from Jill. So I wanted to share the inspiration for how we did the programming this year. So this year was marked by a really major loss for our Department of Psychiatry family. So the loss of Dr. Okungo Winoti, who is a brilliant scholar, researcher, clinician, and just exceptional human being. And in his spare time between raising a family and doing research and seeing patients and doing community service and picking up old ER equipment to donate to other countries to serve those in need, he was an Afrobeat poet. And one of the things he was famous for was bringing his band at medical events and meetings and calling on people to come up and play percussion during the meeting. And myself, a perfectionist and micromanager, could not imagine the idea of leaving to chance that somebody would come up and have a good experience hitting the drums. And he enjoyed my struggle with that. We were residents together, so we always teased each other. And he said to me something that I've thought about so much since his loss and in thinking about planning this event. And he said, Gloria, everyone can play a drum because everyone is born with a heartbeat. And it made me think so much about what we wanted to convey in our Department of Psychiatry Research Day. Everyone can be a researcher. It only requires 2 things that you're all born with, and that is ignorance and curiosity. So I really applaud everyone who took a risk to come on stage for the first time, play a drum, share an idea, and really to meet with our esteemed senior faculty, our illustrious guests to the department, and really put yourself out there. It's not easy, and we really want to recognize you. So I'd ask that anybody who participated in the poster session today, please stand to be acknowledged. I also hope your hearing is okay. I didn't realize with that many posters in one space, it did get a little bit loud, but you guys did terrific. We're very honored to present some awards for our trainees who participated in the poster session. And just in keeping with our theme of everyone gets on stage, that you're part of our research mission, we wanted to have a diverse type of poster opportunities. So we have our traditional research posters. So if you're hanging out around with a researcher, you have the skills, experience to do that, we want to support you. But we also have folks who have great ideas, but maybe don't have the skills yet to implement it or the funding yet to implement it. So we have a research design poster option. Some of those popped out just in the last week before this event. Folks did a great job. And then we have for our passionate clinicians who are interested in doing a QI project. So sharing information about your passion to improve programs and develop programs. So we wanted to recognize those by giving 4 awards. So we have 2 for the traditional poster, 1 for research design, 1 for quality improvement. We're gonna, before I invite our wonderful dean to come up and share a few comments, I wanted to show, we don't have a certificate for you because we don't know who won until about 10 minutes ago. So we are gonna award you with a small pin. This is from the fundraiser that was recently done by Dr. Deanna Kelly at the MPRC and her wonderful team to support NAMI. And these are NeuroBloom pins. And the idea of the pin is to represent a PET scan. So to get people curious, what is that on your pin? And use that as a conversation starter to talk about brain-based illnesses and also to reduce stigma, because it's pretty cool having a pin. So we thought for the award winners to maximize the coolness, we're giving the first pin to our dean so that you guys can be pin buddies. So one day when he comes across you when you're getting your Nobel Prize, you can have it on proudly and he can say he knew you won. So I'm delighted to present a pin to Dr. Gladwin and invite him to just share a welcome to our group and do what deans do, speak on the cuff and share some thoughts about today. So.
Well, thank you, Dr. Rivas. I see you clearly have the charisma of a future dean, so I have to watch my seat. But I also just want to congratulate Dr. Kelly and Dr. Rock Beisel. Incredible science and departmental leadership. Lots of new exciting recruits coming in, which we're thrilled about. Lots of challenges that we face, especially in the mental health domains, but you have incredible leaders. And I do want to share with you that I meet with both of them frequently, and Jill is always communicating how successful you are. I get your newsletter. I get invited to this event way ahead of time and hear updates and information all the time. So really a tireless advocate for all of you. And I do want to thank the Dana Scholars. Where are they? Way to go. And all the presenters, I learned about motivational interviewing, and I want the book because I need to use that on my chairs. And I learned about the challenges in shock trauma and how we need better psychiatric consultation. I learned about a new therapy for postpartum depression. Very exciting, didn't know about that. Learning about ketamine metabolites. And then some of you took down your posters before I came, so I'll get here earlier next time. But you've probably heard with our strategic plan that I'm really thrilled about, because 67% of all the faculty participated in 40 listening sessions. And then we had 9 prioritization sessions. And that strategic plan on every section has a yellow or orange box. And that language is language we heard from all of you about what we need to do. And then we had a community engagement element. But that strategic plan is very purposeful. It has very hard and concrete goals and objectives, some of which are very operational, but also it has aspirational goals. And you'll see at the front that we're focused around generational challenges and mental health, addiction, neuroscience, the frontier of the brain, is top among those challenges. And so if you look at that strategic plan, you really see how foundational and important what all of you do to the success of this institution, this country, and the world. So what you do is the most important thing that we do. I was asking someone in the elevator, why our children have so much anxiety? Why? Obviously these are mysteries, and the solutions are at your fingertips through research and through translation. So I want to thank you. You probably have seen the series in the New York Times that Baltimore has the highest rate of fentanyl overdose per capita than any city in America. So we have an enormous opportunity and challenge and responsibility to address that. And we're very excited with our new Neuroscience Institute that Peg's leading, the Collert Institute for Addiction Medicine, which Eric Weintraub co-leads, and our investment in other areas around the brain and neuroscience and psychiatry, and our support and continued investment in MPRC, which is the crown jewel of psychiatric research and care. So just want to know that I think I visited MPRC 2 or 3 times. I'm very committed to what you all do, to our residency, to our researchers, to our faculty. It's the most important thing that we do. So just thank you for inviting me and giving me a few moments to speak, and thank you for the pin.
So when we thought about who could organize the judging for the poster session, we thought maybe somebody who works with mice might be helpful, a good wrangler. So we're delighted to have one of our basic science experts to oversee this process, Dr. Sarah Clark.
Welcome, everybody. I'm not going to go on too long, but the first thing I want to do is make sure to thank my judges today. You all did an awesome job, and I appreciate not only the time you gave to walking around and talking to everybody, but also just the feedback that you gave, to the presenters, and the comments that you and I and the other judges, our discussions and everything was really, really impressive. So as Gloria already talked about, we have 4 poster categories this year. And we really want to do that in part in order to be able to recognize just the breadth of research that we do in our department. We're a clinical department. We do everything from, working with the patients to working with mice and rats and other things. But it's not all about hypothesis testing. It's about asking questions. It's about observing things with our patients. It's about doing interventions with the community. And so things are happening at different levels across the board. And so that's what we want to really recognize with all of you. So our first category is for quality improvements.
I'm going to invite the dean to come up and to pin them. I guess.
Get you pinned on the board.
Okay.
So our first category is for quality improvement. Quality improvement programs are an integral part of the healthcare system. It's, making sure that we're improving healthcare for our patients. The winner for the quality improvement poster was Mackenzie Sayer.
Please stand up.
Now, each of these are from a PET scan, and each one has, so hers says autism, mine says mindfulness. I don't know if that was purposeful.
And second category is for the research design category. This category, as Jessica, where did I get Jessica from?
Okay.
Gloria said earlier, we all kind of have curiosity. All research starts with a question, but taking that question and building it into a proposal and getting money often takes a lot of work and feedback and everything from your peers. And so designing an experiment is also a major process. So to recognize that, I'd like to acknowledge Felicia Cooper as our winner.
Now, this one says OCD. Research.
And Felicia is actually a graduate student in the program in neuroscience. For the traditional research projects, we actually have 2 categories. And this is because, again, we have such a plethora of different types of research that we do. We kind of broke this up into kind of the observational studies and the hypothesis testing studies. So for those observational studies, the ones that range from interacting with patients, creating those case studies, seeing something novel, to finding or asking a question and digging into the literature and doing a review, or doing a retrospective study, digging into the patient records and figuring out, what happened with the different interventions. That's what we're looking at here. Our winner for that category is Janina Ezra David.
This one's PTSD. What happens when you need a photo with the dean in front of 200?
And then finally, for the traditional experimental study, hypothesis testing study, the winner is Carolyn Doty.
That one. Congratulations to our winners.
Someone's got to take the time.
Future of women in science looking pretty bright, people.
Oh, that's true.
Sarah didn't even notice. Our next award, this gives me a great pleasure to introduce a wonderful guest and supporter of our department. It's really special when we can build a relationship with someone who's excited about supporting the research financially, but also showing up, coming, talking to people at their posters, sharing their feedback, their ideas, and their enthusiasm. So we're delighted to have Ms. Kitty Simpson come from the Betty Hughes Foundation, and I'll invite her to come up. I promised I was not going to put her on the spot, but she'll come up and stand as we announce information of the winner, this year's winner. But I just wanted to highlight this information about Betty Hughes, that, again, the role of physician, even back in the 1940s, was not just to treat patients, it was to speak up and advocate. And I think this award really is symbolic of that approach to care, that we want to do research because we want to improve care and the wellness of children and families. So I'll invite Dr. Robbie Schwartz to come up and share a few words about the winner.
Yeah, put out my speech. So I have to be short, I understand, but I could talk for a long time about a winner today. That's Sai Kumar, who is here. And first of all, congratulations, Sai. We found out very recently that you got this award, and we are extremely pleased and grateful to the Betty Hughes Foundation. It's something that the NPRC, which I'm part of, has been very, very lucky and fortunate for several years to be targeted by. So we have Jim Waltz here and maybe others who've gotten the Betty Hughes Award. So thanks again for doing this. It means a lot to all of us. And it's really we are part, as the Dean said, and others know, NPRC is part of the Department of Psychiatry. So we see this as an acknowledgement of the whole department and beyond, and the School of Medicine. And I want to just spend maybe 2 to 3 minutes to give you a bit of background on Sai, on our winner today. So he's been at the NPRC for over a decade. His CV is not something I'm going to repeat here, but it's very impressive. And so he's a biochemist by training, and we've been working together for many, many years. And he's been one of those people in the laboratory who you always assume is going to be there and do good. And that's exactly what he does. So you don't have to worry about him. And he doesn't take, he's not one of the people who just want the credit. And so this is the first time actually that you get officially acknowledged, other than, and I'm so happy with and for you to do that. And just to give a bit more detail about the science. So we're working on a compound that some of you may have heard called kynurenic acid. Don't laugh. Peg has never heard of it. So we've been working this for a long time, and it's been very, very interesting. Has to do with cognition, among other things, and psychiatric diseases. And Sai was instrumental in running many experiments over the years. And one of the things they found out is that an enzyme that is responsible for chymeric acid synthesis, sorry, I'm becoming a bit more biochemical here, is reduced in the brains of people with schizophrenia, which is really a key finding, which has been cited hundreds of times now, his paper, and there's many other papers too. So, but that was still part of our laboratory. But a couple of years ago, several years ago actually, we started to look at the effects of chymeric acid in the prenatal brain. There's a lot we don't know about what's happening with the brain in pregnancy, early in life, and on and on and on. He got interested in this. And one of the things that he started to pursue was, what if you change chymeric acid levels prenatally in the mom? And this is done in rats and in mice. And it turns out a lot happens later with the offspring that impairs cognition and so forth, led to drug development, which is now in human clinical trials and so forth. So it's a big story. But the significant reason why we are here today for size, because a couple of years ago we said, well, if you have more chymeric acid prenatally, we know what happens, bad things happen. But what if you have too little chymeric acid in the brain? And around this concept, without going into details, if you want, I'm sure he will tell you more about this, he put together a project which nobody's ever thought of in worldwide, but which now I'm going to several conferences and comes up all the time. So what happens when you have too much chymeric acid? It's a bad thing. What if too little? Is that a good thing, or is it also a bad thing? We don't know. Compensatory mechanisms and so forth. That's what this Betty Hughes proposal is all about. And I'm very, very pleased that you'll be able now, with the help of Kitty, if I may call you Kitty.
You may.
To be able to pursue this for the next year. And we're very much looking forward to see the results. So I should stop right here, and sorry to be a bit longer than I thought it would be.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. Congratulations. Photo.
Bobby, why don't you get into
Because I'm not the award. Thank you.
It's hard to be concise when you're a proud parent. I totally get it. Totally get it. Well deserved. Congratulations. Next, we have a recognition. So one of my fun jobs as research vice chair in the department is that if somebody is due to receive an award and they can't make it, I get to swoop in like the Oscars and get your certificate on your behalf. So I've had a lovely certificate that does not have my name on it in my office. So we wanted to represent. So just to mention, for those who are not familiar, CARDI's really a one-stop shopping for supporting career development across the faculty lifespan. And they recently had an exciting program where they recognized folks who climbed that mountain, and through a lot of hard work and perseverance, they were able to get their first federal grant. So I don't know if Mary Schreiber is still here. I know she was getting pulled into another meeting. She probably had to go, but we wanted to invite up so I can give the certificate that I stole, but also to recognize both awardees. So we'd like them to come up with their mentors, Dr. Haley Miles McLean and Dr. Stephanie Hare. So please come up for a big round of applause. So Haley received her certificate. I'm going to give Stephanie hers back to the rightful owner. And then please get a photo if we can. Thank you. Congratulations.
You gotta get into it too, right?
Okay.
So as you can tell with our programming, we put a lot of awards in, and we specifically switched the order this time where we do the awards at the beginning and not at the end because it was always so rushed at the end. But also because we want you to feel good about your accomplishments. And then we want to have a keynote on a very difficult topic. So we roll up our sleeves and figure out what we're going to start on Monday morning. But we have two final awards we're going to give that are really quite special awards in our department. I'm going to invite Dr. Tony Lehman to come up first to say a few words about the Jarboe Award. And I will say, just to make things a little bit fun for you, the two awardees are sitting amongst you and they have no idea that they're going to be receiving these awards. I won't go into the details because the chair is not here and I want to make sure the dollar amount is correctly, but it's a research award plus a nice plaque. So Dr. Lehman will tell us about the first award.
Thanks, Gloria. Well, I'm very delighted that this award is being given again this year. So the McKee Jarboe Award is named after a patient of mine, actually, who I first met in 1986 when I came to the department, started treating him for psychosis. And McKee was from Easton. He was a retired Marine. He was an accountant. He worked in his family business in Easton. And had severe psychosis and had actually lost his wife before this. And after about a year, he suddenly died. And which is not unusual for people with psychotic disorders. You're aware that they tend to die at a young age. He died of a heart attack. So anyways, I went to the funeral and I met his family, and he had a sister who was younger than him. And she and her husband came to me after the funeral and said they didn't know this, but McKee had a life insurance policy. And he had named them the beneficiary. And he left them this money so they could buy a house. They were a young family with 3 children. And she and her husband said to me, she said, we decided we don't want to do that with the money. We want to donate the money to an award in the Department of Psychiatry for some purpose. It's a good NAMI story even, right? And so they asked me what I thought would be a good use of the award. And I said, well, I thought making an award for a young faculty member who's interested in doing research because it's so difficult to get funding at that time. So, so we gave the award over a long period of time. We've actually given it to 31 people over 20 years. And I'm just going to name a couple of the people who've received this. The very first person was Lisa Dixon, who some of you remember, who's our training director. Richard Goldberg, who, I don't know if Richard's here today. Greg Elmer, okay. Julie Cranbuell, Gloria Reeves, Akunda Wanoti, and Jim Waltz, among others. So, and I think there was a time that wasn't being given, but now we're giving it again, and I think it's very well deserved. And it's a great tribute to McKee and his family. I lost contact with the family, but his sister did stop and see me maybe a decade ago to see what was happening with the award, and I was able to show her the list of people who had got this, and she was very pleased. So.
Thank you so much, Tony. And we'll ask Tony to hold the plaque. We'll be giving it out. And Dr. Buchanan, would you like to come up? And he will share with us what name is written on the plaque and why they're very deserved of this award. I know, sorry.
So the name on the plaque is Dr. Stephanie Hare. And I just want to make a few comments about Stephanie. I think of Stephanie as being the personification of the good citizen scientist. A recent example of her good citizenship is that she served as one of the poster judges today for the Research Day poster session. She's also been an instrumental contributor to the NPRC DEI efforts, as well as the department DEI efforts. and has also played a pivotal role in the NAMI fundraising program that we did. So I think those are just some of the things that really demonstrate her being a good citizen to the department, which is just so important for a department to be healthy. But she's also a very creative and innovative scientist, and her CAVE award, which she received the CARDI award for, is a reflection of that. She is looking at some of the underpinnings of cognitive impairments in people with schizophrenia and doing it in a way that I think will be very productive and fruitful as she continues with her project over the next couple of years. So Stephanie, would you like to come up and receive your award?
Stephanie's such a good citizen. She wasn't actually a poster judge. We pulled her to wrangle middle schoolers. So if you were wondering why you didn't see her, that was why. And finally, the last award. I know we're spending a lot of time on this, but we feel like this is really important in our department culture. We're giving the top award for a junior researcher in our department. And sometimes when you give an award, you have the internal folks speak about the awardee, and sometimes you invite your psychiatry cousin from Department of Pharmacology. So we're very delighted to have Dr. Peg McCarthy say a few words. Sorry, Peg, so many awards, I just forgot to say. So this award, to explain, so we're very extremely grateful to have the presence of Dr. Rick Taylor joining us today. The Taylor family loves two things: psychiatry. I know you're a neurologist, but I feel like honorary psychiatrist. Psychiatry and supporting young people. And so we're especially honored to have you come today so that we can give the award, which is in your brother's name, for the generous contributions of not just your brother, but your entire family. And your commitment coming here today is really special. So we thank you so much. And we'll, after Peg speaks, we'll invite you to come up and say a few words.
Great. Thank you. I also wanted to thank Rick. He tells me that this award was started by his brother, and then he and his sister finished it out. So there's an endowed fellowship. His brother graduated here in 1973, I believe, right? And you said that there was no research in psychiatry at that time, and he recognized that dearth. And this is how we get to build up things like important areas where we're lacking. So you can obviously see we now have a lot of research in psychiatry. It was really my great honor to announce the winner of the Taylor Endowed Fellowship. When Jill asked me to do this, she said, do you know this person? And I laughed and said, you have no idea how well I know this person. I have known this person since the day she first sat on campus. And the Taylor Award winner is Sarah Michelle Clark. I do want to say a few words about Sarah, who I admire enormously. I met Sarah when she applied to our graduate program because I was the director at the time. And she had a rough start, is the honest truth, and but she persevered. She's persevered through enormous numbers of setbacks and difficulties, many of them not of her own making, and many of them which made most people quit. But she never did. She had enormous grit and determination. She ended up graduating from the Department of Pharmacology's PhD program, and I do believe you were the last graduate of that program as it was being closed when we constructed G-Pills. She then she got her degree with Paul Urowski. She then stayed on to do a postdoc with Leo Tonelli, which is where she really sparked her interest in psychoneuroimmunology. She did absolutely path-breaking work on T-regulatory cells and social behavior, anxiety, and fear. Then Leo left us to go to the NIH, leaving her adrift again. She then moved under the tutelage of Todd Gould and joined his division as an assistant professor, but she really had to, make her own way to find her own funding as a PhD in a clinical department. She's published close to 20 papers in high impact journals and has really carved out a unique niche looking at T regulatory cells and brain development and how they regulate critical social behaviors like fear and anxiety. And as a result of her hard work and determination, she's been awarded a NARSAD grant, which is one of the most prestigious research grants in psychiatry, and then more recently an R21 grant from the NIH as the PI. She has gone from being a student to my friend, my colleague, my collaborator, my co-author, the mentor to my graduate students. And I think it's only just the beginning of what's going to be an extraordinary career. So congratulations, Sarah, for this month.
Sarah, since you got to torture people today, make them answer questions at the poster, we're going to make you stand there for just a moment. We're going to have Dr. Taylor come up and say a few words. And I'd also like to invite Dr. Todd Gould to come up as her division director for when we present the award. Thank you, Dr. Taylor.
Many of you may be wondering why I'm here. Well, because I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm actually a neurologist, but I do want to give you a little bit of background about my personal involvement in the psych department here. And the reason I came to this med school originally was because I was going to be a psychiatrist. I started out with that was my interest. And I was in the first group of students in the so-called CAP program. And most of you here obviously know what that is. I was in the first group and was mentored by Dr. Walter Weintraub, whom we all fell in love with. And I then sort of migrated a little bit. In addition to psychiatry, I was going to do neurology too, because I wanted to be a neuropsychiatrist. But the head of the neurology department at the time said that was a good idea, but that he wanted me first. I had to do neurology first before I finished my psychiatric residency. And in that course of that, I sort of realized I would not be a good psychiatrist and just went into just neurology. So that's how I ended up being a neurologist. And for this award, my brother, who unfortunately is passed away a number of years ago. When he did his training here, there was no research, significant research in the psychiatry department at all. And this was something that he felt was a significant lack. And he started the Ronald Taylor Endowment for a young faculty member and researcher with that in mind. Unfortunately, he passed away before he could fund it completely, but because this was so important to him, my younger sister, Debbie, and I decided to continue the funding and finish it off so it could be something that would be in his memory. So that's how I ended up here. And it's an honor to be here and an honor to present this to you, and congratulations.
Thank you so much. All right, Sarah, now you get it. That is Todd here. Yeah,
Together. Let's get Peggy in.
yeah. Thank you so much. All right. Feeling good about the future? Yeah, it's pretty great. Okay, now we're going to switch gears. So we've had a moment to really acknowledge the great work and the future of our department, but we also want to think about future directions. So we're very honored to have an esteemed visitor to our school to present on a top priority area for research growth and clinical development in our department. So invite Dr. Gustavo Medeiros to come and introduce our speaker.
Hello, everyone. My name is Gustavo Medeiros. I'm an assistant professor here at the Department of Psychiatry. And I'm here to announce the last 6 awards. No, just kidding. So, I'm here to introduce our speaker, Dr. Nolan Williams. So he's mainly focused on novel therapeutics with a special focus on neuromodulation for mood disorders. I don't want to lose the opportunity to talk about our depression center. So we started in December of last year, and slowly the center is growing. We offer consultations for difficult to treat patients. We offer ECT, we offer intranasal esketamine, and we also offer TMS. We have a very good TMS machine. And last week, we finished the intranasal induction phase of a patient that was depressed for much time. And he said to me, this was the best week of my last 2 years. So this depression center has been so rewarding because we are providing resources to people that would never had the possibility of having access to these treatments. Going back to Dr. Williams, so he did his, he's one of the most innovative researchers currently in psychiatry. He did his education at Medical University in South Carolina, medical school, and then dual residencies in psychiatry and in neurology, and then did a clinical fellowship, a research fellowship. So as some of the crazy people in the research, we like to study many years, decades. Sorry for the bad joke again. So thank you so much for being here. He's associate professor at Stanford, and is gonna talk a little bit about his work. His work is most known because of the SAINT protocol, where he got the TMS and did a couple of changes that made it much more effective, much more precise, and also much shorter in duration. So I'd like to welcome Dr. Nolan Williams.
How's everybody doing? Thank you for having me. Hard to follow all those great awards, but I'll try. Yeah, so I'll talk to you a little today about some of the brain stimulation work we do. I also have some psychedelic research that's ongoing. I didn't have the time to kind of cover that, but happy to talk after about that, and some invasive work that we're currently working on as far as invasive neurostimulators. For my disclosures, so I'll talk to you about kind of principles of neurostimulation in general, and then try to show you how we apply that thinking to new stimulation approaches. So there we go. So I'm going to show you some old videos. Okay. Yes. Okay. IT guy. Okay. That's fine. They can just, I'll describe it. Hopefully you believe me. So on the left side is a gentleman with tremor and a deep brain stimulator, and they turned his deep brain stimulator off and his arm was shaking, right? And on the right side, he's playing the piano like 15 minutes later. These are super old videos. We've known that you can do this for quite a long time, since the late 80s. You can put surgically implant a stimulator into the brain of Parkinson's patients, essential tremor patients, dystonia patients, and disrupt the circuit abnormality and have symptomatic improvement. Benabid and Malin DeLong received the Lasker Award for this a couple of years ago. Unfortunately, Malin DeLong passed away a couple of weeks ago, but his legacy lives on. And I'd argue that just as important as the legacy of developing a novel therapeutic for these hard to treat neurological conditions, that these two developed this idea of using neurostimulation as a probe of brain function, right? In particular, what they came up with is this idea that you need to, in order to stimulate the brain and interact with the brain, you need to know a pattern that's physiologically relevant to the problem. You need to know how much of a dose to give, and you need to know where to give it. And if those three things aren't in place, it doesn't work very well, right? If they are in place, then the video I couldn't show you, you get this very impressive elimination of tremor, where the person can't do anything with that arm before and can play the piano after, right? Maybe these videos work. No. So maybe so. This is a lady where she had Parkinson's. She had her placed the subthalamic nucleus where you normally place the lead, and it went deep into the nigra. In the nigra, you induce a depressive-like syndrome, and you can only see it when the stimulator's on. You turn the stimulator off, this goes away, right? And again, this is a super old video. You can tell this is from like, the 90s or something, right?
الديار عليكم سلام أبت أن تزل النفوس الكرام حين العروبة بيت حرام.
Set of symptoms like this gentleman here, right? So that's the principle. You have to be in the right spot in the brain, stimulate with the right physiologic signal, produce the right dose. And what I'll argue to you today is that that's a principle that spans across all neuromodulation approaches, not just deep brain stimulation. And it's a phenomenon that's important in thinking about this. So we'll switch gears from neurology to depression. This is the most disabling condition worldwide. Our treatments do not match the acuity of the problem, period. We don't have treatments that can solve the problem in the time frame that we need to solve it in order to get people in and out of psychiatric emergencies. I see people when they get to that green box on the bottom. I don't take care of people anywhere before that. That's just what we do. We take care of the sickest of the sick. Severe depression is as disabling as dying of cancer without treatment. I think your great dean highlighted that a bit ago, most of you all know this, but this is an incredibly disabling problem, and it's even more problematic than dying of cancer without a treatment because your family's around you and totally understands that problem, right? They don't always understand this one. And so the pragmatic issue that we intended to solve when we started thinking about what I'm going to show you in a bit 10 years ago is this problem that in the US healthcare system, it's different in Japan, it's different in Europe, but in the US healthcare system, people stay in the hospital for an average of 7.4 days, right? In 7.4 days, the person's supposed to go from at risk to not at risk. But as we all know, that doesn't happen, right? When people get discharged from the psych hospital, they're 3 times as likely to end their life than the rest of their lifetime, right? We could get into the reasons why that's the case, but I think you all understand the problem, the psychiatrists and clinicians, psychologists in the room. And if your ER looks anything like ours over at Stanford, people are boarding in the hallways, waiting for no real new treatments to be offered to them. Some of you may argue that ECT is that, but ECT is only used in 1.5% of people that meet Medicare, Medicaid criteria for ECT in this country. So it's effectively not a scalable solution for that problem. TMS has been around for some time, as you all likely know. And the way I want to kind of frame this for you is, on the left panel, that's a neuro-navigated TMS device. We'll talk about a little bit more about that later. It uses Faraday's law to induce current and electrically conducting substances. In the case of your head, that's your brain and the nerves that are in your scalp. On the right is a transcutaneous pacemaker from the 40s, right? This idea that before we had an implanted pacemaker, we were pacing people externally. And I would argue that the same learnings that that folks that received this early kind of externalized pacemaker got to are the same learnings that we're getting to with an externalized magnetic stimulator device. And we're kind of 100 years ahead in the thinking, in this case, around how to modulate brain electrical activity. And so the stimulator is not like a pill. So you don't want to think about it from the same pill thinking that we think about drugs, right? You can move around dose, but the compound is the compound, right? With a neurostimulation device, it's more like a pharmaceutical company, right? It's more like a scalpel. You can make a lot of different treatments with a scalpel. You can make a lot of different treatments with a pharmaceutical, development process. Some of them are going to work really well. Some of them are going to work kind of well. Some of them aren't going to work at all, right? And that's what you get with neurostimulation. And so the first TMS approaches were incredibly careful, right? Rightfully so. Lower doses, lower intensities. And as there was a natural evolution of the technology over time, the technology got better. In the same way the Model T is not the car you drove here with, right? Cars have gotten better over the last 100 years. But the problem with the old ways of doing TMS were more related to the other issues around the time of how do you image the brain. So in the mid to mid 90s, when this first came out, people were using skull-based measurements and using trigonometry to find an average spot on the skull. How many of you would sign up for an average chest circumference heart surgery, right? I haven't gotten a taker yet, right? And this is the same sort of thing. This idea that you can go to the same spot in the skull, you can go to the same spot in the brain if you have an image, but you can't do both, right? And so with that came the original TMS approach that, again, was using skull-based targeting, using these really early non-neurobiologically relevant stimulation approaches. And with that came some improvements, but it took 6 weeks to use and didn't really match the acuity of the problem at hand. More recently, there's been an evolution towards using neurobiologically innate rhythms, in this case, hippocampal rhythms or memory rhythms recorded from hippocampal slice in animal studies. So really one of the great examples of translation of neuroscience into psychiatric treatment, right? This ability to play a memory signal through a magnetic coil into the brain and send the brain in a direction that allows for its excitation to change, the amount of excitability of that given cortical region. It was all developed in human normal motor cortex, not in psychiatric patients, in normal healthy controls. A lot of these were in neurology labs, and they published this in Neuron in 2005, showing that if you play an excitatory kind of potentiating stimulation approach to the TMS coil, you can actually drive up excitability as measured by changes in the motor evoked potential in the motor system. And it's used as a surrogate for reading out whether code, like a telegram, played into the brain has a neurobiologically relevant response. So the top box is excitation. There's an inhibition stimulation approach called CTBS in the bottom, and then the mid bit is kind of an inert one, which is what you want to see. You want to see that you can move it up, move it down, and not move it at all. That makes it most believable, right? And the parameter set really matters. And this really is important because the theta burst stimulation actually drops the time needed to apply the same sort of effect from almost an hour to 3 minutes, because it, as I said earlier, is neurobiologically sourced, kind of coding into the brain, if you will. Some of my friends in Canada conducted this trial, which is a non-inferiority trial, that 3 minutes of the kind of hippocampal rhythm-derived stimulation versus the old almost hour-long stimulation over 6 weeks, and found it to be quite non-inferior, one of the best non-inferiority trials, led to an FDA clearance, this was a Lancet paper showing that 3 minutes in the chair, it's just with this, really neurobiologically relevant stimulation is just as effective as the 40-minute bit applied over 6 weeks. So some people say, oh, TMS, it's just, you're seeing the treater every day for an hour, or you must be just getting these non-specific therapeutic effects. But at 3 minutes, you can barely list off what you ate at McDonald's the night before, and you're out of the chair, right? So less likely. This is the parameter set, and I will point you to this pulses per course of 18,000 pulses. That'll be important later, but in this case, applied over 6 weeks. It's found to be non-inferior. So back to the goal, right? The goal was to compress this, protracted TMS course that looks like a oral antidepressant timeline of 6 to 8 weeks or something down to a couple of days to solve this inpatient issue, right? So again, go back to the Benabid DeLong set of questions. How do you do it? You do it by finding the sweet spot of increased cortical excitability and dose per session, which was worked out many, many years later after we started doing this. So the sweet spot of 1,800 pulses per session at submotor threshold intensity. This was a Taiwanese study where they used that sort of a stimulation approach, separated from sham on a once-a-day stimulation paradigm. And then the next bit is, if you're going to do this multiple times a day, what's the interval in between, right? If you're going to apply it, then you need a certain amount of time in between to apply it again. And we looked again to the learning literature, right? How many of you have used note cards to study for an exam? Anybody? Somebody says, yeah. And so what do you do? Does anybody write out one note card and look at it 50 times and then never look at the note card again? Anybody do that? Nobody does that. I haven't had a taker yet. What do? You have 60 to 100 note cards. You write them out. You go through them and you get back to the first one an hour later, right? This is one of the kind of translational neuroscience findings, right? Which is, if I stimulate in mouse hippocampal slice, I get a certain amount of dendritic spine enlargement. If I do it again really quickly, just like looking at the same note card over and over again, you don't get interval increases in dendritic spine enlargement. You do when you wait about an hour to an hour and a half, right? So there's an interval increase, and it makes sense. There's a certain amount of protein synthesis that needs to happen. There's a certain amount of kind of connectivity that needs to change. And that's reflected in psychological experiments I described earlier. That's reflected in this sort of stimulation approach, right? Same thing if you look at normal, healthy control motor cortex stimulation. If you wait just 15 minutes and stimulate again, you get no change in cortical excitability. You start to get some at 30 minutes. So the second one, and I think these slides got flipped somehow, so it should be this, then this. The second one is how much, right? So pharmacologists in the room, what do you do with a new drug? You do dose escalation trials, right? Because you want to see what the highest dose is that has a kind of a tolerable set of side effects. Nobody ever did that with TMS, right? Nobody ever did a dose escalation dosing study. And what we figured out later is, if you take people that are non-responders and you give them, up to 16 weeks of total stimulation, what you find is you pick up more and more responders. You actually pick up 61% of the people that failed at the first time point, which is interesting, right? And with a deep brain stimulation implant, you're giving 500,000 pulses to a Parkinson's patient every day. We're talking about giving like 600 to 3,000 with normal TMS a day, right? So it's actually it's not surprising that you can't get really fast, dramatic effects when you're giving so little, right? And so what we figured out is, how can we use that set of principles I just showed you to stimulate the brain in a much more robust way that's aligned with the neurobiology of how our brains learn? And in this case, we're sending a learning signal, the theta burst learning signal in, and we're telling the brain to turn on, to stay on, to remember to stay on, right? It's a simple code. It's just telling a certain brain region, in this case, the mood regulatory region I'll describe in a minute, that you should turn on, stay on, remember to stay on. We tell it that with this most kind of excitation derived way of doing it, this 1,800 pulses per session, every hour for 10 hours. And with that, we can compress an entire 6-week course of theta burst stimulation to a single day, and we can get people well in 1 to 5 days. It's an average of 2.6 days. by using the same learning principles. So this is, again, just another way of thinking about it. You know, this is the old way of stimulating with TMS. This is a reorganization in time of how the stimulation is applied so that it's compressed and it's aligned with the neurobiology of the speed of how learning works. Maybe you don't raise your hand because you don't want your dean here to know, but how many of you crammed for a test over a week's time? You did that by looking at those note cards over and over again. And that's basically what this is. This is test cramming, right? And we can cram this one piece of information in so many times that you will actually remember it for a year, maybe not like some of the other stuff that you try to learn, right? The third one is where, and the where is important. The where is, where do I stimulate to get this effect, right? And with a modern neural network understanding of neuropsychiatric conditions, the where is informed actually by work from a neurologist out of Harvard, a buddy of mine, Mike Fox, where they took stroke lesions that would cause depression and stroke lesions that did not cause depression, put them over the Human Connectome database, 1,000 normal healthy controls, and then asked the question of, for each one of those lesions put onto this average brain, which ones which ones that had depression, which upstream connectivity target or hub was common between all of them. And that was the left dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, the original depression target, and none of the folks without depression had this connectivity. And so this model of the dorsolateral will come down and clamp down on overactive subgenual cingulate in normal mood. We all have this, you know, you walk by somebody that, oh, maybe that person's mad at me or whatever, and then your dorsolateral clamps down and says, no, they're just having a bad day. This is normal sorts of stuff. In depression, that gets dysregulated, and people have a lot of negative affect and a lot of negative thinking around events in their external environment. TMS re-regulates that connection. And we know it's one of the most replicated neuroimaging findings in psychiatry. It's been replicated like 8 times by 8 independent labs, that if you take that skull measurement and you use that to stimulate, but you get a brain image, and then you ask the question of the linear distance between that spot that you stimulated and the best spot, the shorter the distance is, the better antidepressant effect you get. If you're right over top of it, you get a really good antidepressant effect. If you're 3 centimeters away, outside of the diameter of the coil effect, you don't get an antidepressant effect. We do this with machine learning in a prospective way using something called hierarchical clustering, where we cluster similarly behaving voxels with a correlation coefficient of 0.5 or better. It allows you to split the dorsolateral and the subgenual up and deal with them independently of each other, and then apply a decision algorithm where you're asking which one of the dorsolateral clusters is most anti-correlated or inhibitory to the subgenual cingulate. So instead of using a ruler, you set the patient in the MRI scanner and you do network mapping, and you're trying to find a very specific connection between these 2 brain regions, an inhibitory connection, right? And then, so that's that. And then you output it to a target. And what you're doing there is you're registering the head, just like the functional neurosurgeons do, but without any of the cutting, just with double-sided tape. Registering the head in a stereotactic camera, and you're able to apply the coil in a personalized way, where you can see the functional spot moves around in the structural brain patient to patient. Right? You can apply the target, the stimulation to the target. Okay. So this is the protocol. This has been FDA cleared, breakthrough status, Medicare outpatient, inpatient, and out paying for this. And our experiment is simple for the pharmacologist in the room. Just engage the target and do a dose response curve, right? That's it. For this one, I can show this video, but this can't go on YouTube. Because you guys, do you put these presentations on YouTube? Okay, it just can't be externally, if the video works, let's see. Okay.
September 16, the evening before
Volume,
starting treatment
volume.
for TMS at Stanford.
Is there like a volume thing? Maybe this. Yes. Sounds good. Right.
I'm doing a video documentary of my experience, and I have several questions I will ask every time I do the video. My first one, scaled 1 to 10, physical pain level. I'm at about a 7.
This is one of our early study participants. She decided she wanted to videotape herself, document everything.
Stomach area, little nausea,
Before and after.
little headache in the back of my head. My arms hurt along the bone. I'm really, really, really tired. Having trouble getting a deep breath. So that leads to anxiety level 1 to 10. I'm probably at about an 8 or a 9 because I can't sleep. And I'm anxious about what could happen. I don't know what it looks like on the other side. I don't know what I'll gain or what I'll lose. I don't know if it'll work. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about. Third question. I'm thinking about what the possible outcome could even be. And will I lose my intuition and my sensitivities? Will I gain memory or creativity? Will I be able to sleep? I don't know what this looks like. But I'm going to try it anyway, because I'm the kind of person who tries.
That's the before. This is a couple weeks after she finished her 1 week course.
I'm starting my third week after treatment, and I'm doing really well. In fact, even better, my energy levels are consistent. I get tired at night and go to bed at a regular hour. I talk more clearly. I think more clearly. I have great moments of peace and present moment. I'm answering my voicemail. I'm calling people back. I'm not thinking about anything destructive. I've had a fear thought that came into my head. And usually that sends me into panic and stress. And this time, when I had one, I just talked myself through what would I do and how would it work out okay, which I think means my resilience is up and my ability to live as people normally do. And I've got no side effects. I have nothing to say bad about any of it. The only thing I fear is that it goes away. I'm making my appointments. I'm showing up on time. My thinking is clear. I really am doing really well.
We'll see the data behind that. So 3 trials. First trial was in really quite ill people, most ill people I can find. When you are trying to stimulate a whole 6-week course in a day, you got to justify it, right? So these were folks who were on the deep brain stimulation implant list when that trial closed a decade ago due to futility analysis. They failed ECT, failed conventional TMS, failed some of them 30 meds in a 40-year episode, VNS, you name it. People have probably shown up to your depression center as well. And we got this pretty striking, but not durable effect, right? Where we were able to get people's depression down, but then they relapse back up. In the same way that if you put a deep brain stimulator in a Parkinson's patient, turn it on for a week and turn it off, they regain their symptoms, right? We've since then, this is out, this x-axis is out to a year. I thought I fixed that. So that's month by month out to a year. So what we figured out, and this is unpublished data, we're about to publish it, if you do symptom-triggered retreatment where you actually treat people at some time interval that they need, then you can maintain wellness out to a year, probably indefinitely. So the 10 bars normal and below, right? We're working on a minimally invasive version of this. I'll skip through this just because in interest of time, but we think we can predict response to minimally invasive device. We're building one right now, much like an implanted cardiac pacemaker. The second study we published in 2020, not quite as ill as those failed ECT group. They were kind of one notch below, but still pretty ill. Half of them had 5 or more med failures. They were all in the kind of severe range on the MADRS. And it was surprisingly linear for us, right? That day 0, day 1 is the TMS dose for the old daily 6-week course. So you can see there is some benefit, but not quite completely, not completing the treatment course for most people. The day 2.6 is when they cross the line. They actually hold it longer. If you look at people who are TMS failures, they just needed more dose compared to the TMS naive individuals, and they relapse a little bit quicker, but not as quick as the other group. And we can treat and retreat people and they don't tachyphylax. The targets placed with 1 dot per patient on an average brain. The blue dot is the old way we target TMS. You can see we're pretty surprised. This is pretty dispersed and away from that skull-based measurement. And there's no gradient, right? So there's no get in front of this or behind this point and you can get away with individualized imaging. We can get people retreated and get them back into the same spot over and over again in most people. We did a randomized control trial, moderate to severe severity, moderate to severe treatment resistance. This is our consort diagram. I'll skip through this in the interest of time. Half of these people were unemployed. Their average length of illness was about 9 years for the current episode, 5 meds plus or minus for their med failures. They were in the mid-30s on the MADRS score, so quite sick people. Those are response rates on the bottom. Cohen's d effect sizes of 1.3 to 1.9, so quite striking difference. And if you think about it less like not as a treatment, but as a probe of the underlying neurobiology of depression, 78.5% of people crossed through the remission line at some point in the 4-week follow-up, compared to 13% in the sham group, kind of giving this idea of perturbation, typing of illness, some relevance here. I'll skip through this. Same target distribution. Again, Medicare is now paying for this inpatient, outpatient. In the last, I got like 5 minutes. I got to talk about this biomarker. So Anish Mitra is a WashU graduate, MD, PhD. Spent a lot of time with Marcus Rakel there, a neurologist who developed resting state functional connectivity. And he's finished a psychiatry residency. He's now an assistant professor, but was a fellow with me and Carl Dijsselroth when the work was done here. So this is bold fluctuations of the network nodes that are connected within a given neural network. And so blood follows electrical activity, so you can use it as a surrogate for that. And the old way of thinking about analyzing network connectivity is just to average across the whole network and say that's a network and not take into account individual node temporal variance differences, right? And so another way to deal with this is to, at a network node level, ask the question, which Anish asked for 10 years of his MD, PhD, of what's the temporal relationship of one brain region to another and its activation. And what he found was that in normal healthy controls, essentially everybody, the dorsolateral, that same region we were talking about earlier, is temporally in front of the cingulate, right? So it makes sense. The cognitive control area clamps down on that area that I was talking about earlier. It's kind of conflict sadness area. And people that received SAINT, they had a flipping of the signal so that the dorsolateral was again in front of the cingulate, and the flip was correlated with the MADRS score just in the cingulate, but not in the dorsolateral. It was replicated in a second data set published in PNAS last year. You take the depressed patients pre-treatment, you compare them to our normal healthy controls from the same scanner, which is kind of impressive, but the real impressive thing is normal healthy controls from WashU on a different scanner, different cohort. We saw the same thing, that the cingulate in the average of all of these depressed individuals was temporally in front of the dorsolateral, and that only in Saint responders is that true. So in the people that would not respond to our stimulation approach, they did not have a flip. Their dorsolateral was in the right direction to begin with, and nothing happened on their post-scan. Only in people that responded to Saint was there a flip, and they had, a flip to begin with. The cingulate was in front of the dorsolateral, and on the post-scan, it flipped back into the normal direction. Pretty cool. And the correlation of the flip is, higher in people that are more severe. So this appears to be something that's correlated with higher levels of severity. Yeah, this is bipolar data, but I'll skip through that. All right, so this is my crew. I got a big lab, a lot of collaborators, and a lot of great funding we're very appreciative of. And anybody interested in coming to a clinical fellowship or postdoc or anything, I'm not taking them from you, but if they're leaving anyway. All right.
Thank you so much, Dr. Williams. We have time for a couple questions. Yes.
Have there been any head-to-head comparisons with ketamine, ECT, this therapy, or are you planning those sort of things? And what about other conditions like OCD?
Yeah, great question. And if you want to be a PCORI reviewer on our grant, we'd love that. So this is bipolar data. We've shown we got like a 60% remission in bipolar patients with cognition improved, all that stuff. So we've done this in bipolar. We got OCD data. We got data in borderline personality disorder, comorbid depression. So that's all getting worked out now. And it's an open question. I think, as you know, the PCORI grants are the ones that are big enough to pay for a $20 to $25 million head-to-head comparison, non-inferiority trial with an N of 400 or 500 is what you're going to need to do some of these comparisons. We just know from retrospective matching, head-to-head on some of the data I haven't shown you within patients that we treated in a pilot that if you match them severity and treatment resistance level, you get a similar outcome, but a faster speed with this than ECT. We've treated a bunch of people who didn't respond to ketamine and respond to this, but there's probably a lot of biases in what I just said, right? So you'd have to do a real randomized trial to know that, and conventional TMS, right? Head to head with conventional TMS needs to get done. So hopefully over the next 5 to 10 years, we'll have some of that data. Having Medicare innovation funds to pay for this for Medicare holding patients in the shorter term will allow for us to have the momentum to start to ask those questions.
And just one dumb question, since I'm a country lung doctor, what's the actual physics? What are you delivering? Mm-hmm. You said, for example, with ECT, it's electricity. Yep. With focused ultrasound, it's disruptive frequencies of sound. That's right. What are you delivering and how are you focusing it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the coils, the magnetic coils, have windings, right? Metal windings, copper windings. They wind in certain directionalities to produce different shapes of magnetic fields. And so you can E-field model all of these, right? And so the typical coil design that we all use is called a figure-of-8 coil. And that figure-of-8 coil crosses the windings like so, right? And it creates a very focal point. And in that focal point is a magnetic pulse that induces current in electrically conducting substances. And so in this case, and you're using Faraday's law for this, right? So in this case, it's It can go about 2.5 centimeters with standard coils, and the diameter of the pulse that induces spiking in cortex is, depending upon what you believe, sub-centimeter. So maybe a centimeter, maybe half a centimeter, depending upon what macaque study you're reading or whatever. And so you get this kind of pulse of magnetic stimulation, and you get a depolarization of cortical neurons. That depolarization of cortical neurons, when you place one of these in the fun physics experiment, place one of these TMS coils inside of an MRI scanner, which you can imagine that's fun, right? For these MRI physicists, because it's a magnet and a magnet. If you do that wrong, you've got a real problem, right? But if you do it just right, when you pulse, you get a distribution to the cingulate and the anterior insula, right? So you can actually see that the pulse, the action potential that was the result of this magnetic pulse inducing a current in that cortex and causing an action potential, goes down to the cingulate, goes down to the insula. And that's what we think we're doing. We're sending, what I see is kind of normal-like signals from the dorsolateral. When it's normally working, it's acting in governance of those regions, down through the dorsolateral into that bigger network, and seemingly turning that dorsolateral area on, because you're sending when you send it once, you're not really doing anything, but when you send that kind of signal that I described earlier, the one that's the hippocampal signal, you're sending a signal that's a learning signal, and you're kind of hijacking this area that responds to hippocampal rhythms, but doesn't generate them, right? You're generating them exogenously and turning that system on by sending a memory signal into the brain.
I'll ask one more question, then we use gadolinium to facilitate, polarization of water under a magnetic MRI field. Has anybody thought about contrast agents that could enhance the magnetic field effect on the target tissue? Or
yeah, it's a great question. There's been work for neuro-oncology around how do you use TMS in combination with agents like gadolinium, or essentially chemo agents, so you could drive a lot of the uptake of a given compound into a focal area of brain through this sort of a process. So absolutely. I mean, I don't think anybody's done it for idiopathic psychiatric illness, but certainly for brain tumors, that thinking is there for sure. It's a great question. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I know there are a lot of clinicians who have to go and treat patients with depression with our primitive tools that we have over here. So we're going to end here, but I wanted to thank again. So wonderful to hear from Dr. Williams today. We have a subgroup that are going to meet after this to brainstorm and think about how we can learn from this and apply some new strategies. So thank you again, Dr. Williams.
We have the machine and people can come and I can show the demonstration.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. And then finally, if you liked anything at all about today, please give a warm round of applause to my wonderful assistant, Catherine McDonald. Thank you so much. I know it's been a long morning, but we really appreciate your participation and being part of our research ecosystem today. Thank you.